Now, the question is, how do you know when you really win and when you really lose? In the second phase of this message, we're going to talk about what winning is all about. Now, the normal way that we talk about winning, man's approach to winning, what is it? I beat my opponent, isn't that it? I win the league championship, I'm a winner. In the sports pages, they don't have good effort columns. They don't have wonderful attitude columns. They have wins, losses. And so we've been ingrained from the very beginning to always think of a winner as someone who beats the opponent, a loser as someone who gets beat by the opponent. Your definition of winning, my definition of winning, God's definition of winning is always consistent with the goal. Now, let's say that two people are wrestling and one guy pins the other and the referee raises the hand of one person. Would you assume that the person he raised the hand of is the winner? You would, wouldn't you? Let's say in a race, one person breaks the tape before all the other runners. You would assume then the person who broke the tape would be the winner, wouldn't you? Now let me ask you this. If a person gets beat in a competition but gives all that they have, totally all they have, emotionally, mentally, I mean they put everything they have into it and they still get beat, how many of you would say that person is a winner? You'd be wrong. Because if the goal is to beat the opponent, winning is beating the opponent. Isn't that true? And it doesn't matter what great effort you give, if your goal is to beat your opponent, winning is beating your opponent. But if your goal is to represent Jesus, if your true goal really is to represent Jesus, then you can be beat by the entire pack. And if you've given a total release of all that you have, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, to exactly as Jesus would do it, as you're empowered by His Spirit living in you and through you, then you are a winner from God's perspective. Now, if you're way ahead in the score and you're just thinking of winning as beating your opponent, and you're way ahead in the score, do you have a tendency to slack up? Don't you? I mean, you don't have to kill yourself to win. You've already beat your opponent, basically. Let me ask you this. If you're way behind in the score and time is running out, and your goal is to beat your opponent, not to represent Jesus, but to beat your opponent, do you have a tendency to slack up then too? That's very common. If we're way ahead or we're getting wiped out, if our goal is to beat our opponent, we slack. If you go against what's considered an undefeatable opponent, you may be beat before you even start if your goal is simply to beat your opponent. Nobody else has beat your opponent, beat the person. What makes you think you can? Now, God's goal is different. God's goal, again, is consistent with the goal of representing Jesus. So here's what God's goal is, and it's based on Colossians 3:23. Colossians 3:23, and in your Bible that you have, that's page 1165. 1165 in your Bible, the FCA Bible. Colossians 3:23. This is a tremendous passage. I want to encourage you to memorize this passage if you haven't already. It is God's definition of winning. I'm going to quote the translation I have. It might be a little bit different in your Bible there, but whatever you do, do your work heartily or enthusiastically, your Bible says, as for the Lord rather than for men. Whatever you do, let me ask you this. Whatever you do, would the word whatever include wind sprints? Yes. Would the word whatever include carrying out your assignment? Yes. Would the word whatever include when you're sitting on the bench, you don't feel sorry for yourself, but would the word whatever include sitting on your bench and giving encouraging words to the starters? Yes. Whatever you do, do your work heartily. You know what the word, I like the word it has in the Bible here, enthusiastically. What that means, in fact, that's where we get the phrase total release, right from that word. It means the total release of all that you are, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, all together, exactly in the image of Jesus himself at that given moment. That's what winning is from God's perspective. The total release of all that you are toward representing Jesus, empowered by his Spirit in any given situation. You could come in with a poor performance, a physical performance from you on a given day because of a lot of factors involved. You may be injured, you may not have much sleep, but you're a winner if your goal is to represent Jesus in whatever you do and to give every ounce of energy that you do have, not that you wish you had, not that you will have someday, not that you would have if you were rested, but that you have at that given moment. A total release of all that you are at that given moment. If you do that, you're a winner from God's perspective. Now let me go back to what Jesus went through once again. I talked about the garden prayer in Gethsemane, talked about the crucifixion briefly. Before he was crucified, Jesus went through a very difficult, torturous, barbaric experience, the scourge. Now, if you can picture, you've seen the cat of nine tails. I'm not talking about the animal cat, but the Roman whip. It had 9 leather thongs onto it, woven together in a handle. On the end of those leather straps usually would be a piece of broken bone or a stone, a metal of some sort. And there would be leaded weights on the straps to cause more impact when that scourge hit a person. And what they did for Jesus, and he had a choice to make in this. You have a choice to make in your drills. You have a choice to make in your carrying out your assignment. You have a choice to make as you prepare for a workout or a competition. You have a choice to make, either man's way or God's way. Man's way or God's way. Jesus had that same choice. Going through the scourge, he could have prevented it from happening. He could have said, wait a minute. I understand what you want to do to my body. I understand you want to peel the skin off my body. I understand that. And you're doing it because I and the Father are one. I claim to be God. You're doing that because I have followers that claim I'm the Messiah because I said I'm the Messiah. Well, I'm going to set the record straight. I'm not the Messiah. I'm a carpenter who wanted I wanted to rep around the country. I'm not who I claim to be. I renounce everything I said. I do not want to be scourged. Yet Jesus knew who he was. He couldn't renounce who he was. And he was willing to get up on that platform with a post in the middle of the platform, to have his wrists tied by rawhide to the top of the stake, to have his back stripped bare, to have that Roman soldier come back up on the platform with that scourge in his hand, and to take that scourge and smash across the shoulder blades, and as those hook-like implements sunk in, scrape it or scourge it down the back. There's a doctor in Birmingham, Alabama that did a lot of study on cadavers, dead bodies, scourging them. Discovered that between the 18th and the 25th lashing of the scourge, the skin would be peeled off the victim's back. Somewhere around the 35th blow on most cadavers, the flesh would be so torn apart, if you and I wanted to do this, if we had the stomach for it, which I wouldn't have the stomach for, we could take our hands and just push the flesh aside and see some of the internal organs. That's what Jesus went through. He chose to do it because he knew what his goal was, the cross, to represent his Father on the cross, to represent you and me on the cross. And he was willing to go through this. Folks, in sports, if you're in the comfort zone, you're not truly competing the way you should. If you're a physical fitness person and just want to run to keep in shape, you need to stay in the comfort zone. That's good. That's good for you for life. But as a competing athlete, you can't stay in the comfort zone. When you choose to allow Jesus to compete through you, when you choose to rely on his strength in you, that's when you can get out of the comfort zone and even welcome it. And tomorrow we'll find out how you can even welcome it. The goal for you is to represent Jesus. As we go out in competition, that's your goal. Winning is the total release, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, toward representing Jesus, to allowing Him to live through you for that given moment.